Hello, my name is Jim Herman. I've represented Social Security and veterans disability claimants for the past 25 years, and I also work nationwide. I'm an approved Social Security Administration video site, which enables me to work nationwide. So, regardless of your location, it doesn't matter. We're able to provide you with competent representation. Um, a study done by an entity of the United States government has indicated that having representation by a person like me, that you're 3 times more likely to be approved for your disability claim. And we, of course, also strive for fast approvals. Nobody can guarantee a fast approval, but it's our goal to do everything possible to get that claim approved for you as fast as humanly possible. I can be reached at my toll-free number, 800-900-4440, 800-900-4440, and you can reach me at my Gmail account, wjhermann, Hermann, at gmail.com, 1 R, 2 N's, wjhermann, Hermann, at gmail.com. I wanted to provide some insights into schizophrenia and how to improve your odds of being approved with a diagnosis of schizophrenia. Schizophrenia is a horrible disease, a horrible problem for anyone who's dealing with that. And it's incredibly debilitating, which means it greatly limits your functional capabilities as well. And always remember the key word to being approved for Social Security disability is the word function. Um, Everything with regard to Social Security disability approvals has to do with function. Um, and one of the things the administrative law judge will find in making your decision is your what they call your residual functional capacity, abbreviated as RFC, and that will determine whether or not you're able to do any of your past work, and that will determine whether or not you're able to do any other work that exists in the national economy. And that work doesn't have to exist in your own um, geographic area. It could be, they use national numbers for that. And doesn't necessarily make sense to you, doesn't necessarily make sense to me, but that's, we have to deal with the system the way it works. Um, but if you're going to be approved for um, schizophrenia, of course, the first thing you need to do, if you have a computer or a telephone that uh, enables any sort of Google searching, just search for adult listings, schizophrenia, and there you'll find listing 12.03, and it lists the criteria that Social Security Administration is going to utilize in making their decision. And it seems to be the general consensus of all practitioners, including me, that your best odds for being approved with a diagnosis of schizophrenia is to meet the listing. There are 2 other ways to be approved for disability. One is to what we call GRID. GRID means giving consideration to the medical vocational guidelines that you're um, given your residual functional capacity, you should be approved. The grids are typically not, well, they're not applicable to mental health matters alone, but many folks who are dealing with a mental health impairment are also dealing with physical impairments as well. But then the other opportunity to be approved is for the administrative law judge and for the adjudicators at earlier levels to make a finding that you have a residual functional capacity that is less than sedentary. Sedentary job we typically think of as maybe the typical office job that a person may have. In other words, there are not a great deal of significant exertional requirements, things of that sort. But our best shot for schizophrenia is that you actually meet the listing. And of course, we've developed forms. Doctors are allergic to forms. I understand that. But one of the best things you can do to help yourself is to have us send you the schizophrenia form, which we'd be happy to do, and have your doctor sign off on that form. Now, just the doctor's signature alone is still not enough. The administrative law judges and the other adjudicators are required to look at whether or not the treatment you've had, the medical records related to that treatment, actually support that doctor's conclusion that you meet that listing. And you may not necessarily have to meet it. You can also be medically equal to the listing requirements. Now, I'm not going to take your time to go through all of the elements of that listing, because we can do that in writing, as I indicated, or you can, even if you're just searching by a telephone. I know many of my clients don't have the privilege of having a computer and an internet connection that is reliable. And so if you're searching by your phone alone, you'll still be able to go to adult listings and look for listing 12.03, and you'll see the requirements there. A lot of the requirements, though, they're very similar in the sense, the mental health requirements are very similar in the sense that the Social Security Administration is still going to be looking for marked limitations in the activities of daily living and social functioning, concentration, persistence, and pace. And by that, they're talking about, okay, you have a diagnosis of schizophrenia, which we know is incredibly debilitating, but the adjudicators and decision makers at the Social Security Administration also need to identify to what extent is this impacting your overall life. And by overall life, that's what we're talking about, the activities of daily living, the things you're able to do on a typical day, the things that you're able to do with regard to your ability to, by social functioning, they don't necessarily mean, going to parties, if you will. Not necessarily a good example, but what they're really looking primarily at, everything Social Security disability revolves around full-time work. Because that's the bottom line question, are you able to work full-time? And so they're looking at how your capacity to interact with your coworkers, your supervisors, potentially in some jobs, the general public, whether or not you're able to work without disturbing your coworkers. And then, of course, then there is what we would normally think of as social, and that typically would be, what your family relationships, your relationship. Are you married? Are you single? Have you had difficulty in those relationships? I know many of my clients, sadly, have been in abusive relationships, and that, of course, contributes to the worsening of their mental and physical health. And we hope that has not been the case, but that's been the case with regard to many of the clients that I represent. The Social Security Administration requires that people like me provide competent and valuable representation, and that's always in the back of my mind, and so we're going to do the very best we can. This will be a partnership. As you know, I don't get paid if you don't get paid, so we're going to do everything we can to legitimately make this work for both of us. And then, as I indicated, the concentration, persistence, and pace, and just for example, let's hypothetically assume you're, let's say you're on an assembly line at a factory. Things are coming at you not real fast, but on a steady basis. Would you be able to maintain attention for at least 2-hour segments? Because in a typical job, you're going to start your work day and then you're going to have a break about halfway through the morning, then a lunch break, then halfway through the afternoon, another break. So all those become essentially 2-hour segments. And that's what the decision makers are looking at. And if you have a diagnosis of schizophrenia, odds are your ability to maintain attention is going to be significantly impaired as well. And always remember that a marked limitation is what these decision makers are looking at. And by a marked limitation, they're talking about, well, I tell you what, I provided a separate video on this particular topic, and so I don't want to take your time to digress too much on that, but look for that, and you'll see that in my videos, and it's labeled as the quick reference guide that the Social Security adjudicators utilize in making their decisions with regard to mental health impairments. Let me mention to you as well that you can never have too much evidence. And what do I mean by that? I mean, the more statements that you can get from family members, friends, former teachers, former bosses, coworkers, the more you can get, the better. The more you can get, the greater the odds that you're going to be approved. So don't think that those are not relevant, because they're very, very helpful to your application. One of the most significant obstacles related to seeking approval for a mental health issue has to do with the lack of objective medical evidence. And you can well imagine that if you were a decision maker for the Social Security Administration, you too would be looking for objective medical evidence to support your decision. And when we talk about a physical impairment, we can look at X-rays and things of that sort. I've been, as of late, doing additional research related to schizophrenia, and I'm finding that there are experts like Dr. David Morton, M-O-R-T-O-N, and he recommends the following objective tests. Well, let me just read those and list them. Now, you don't have to understand these. I don't have to understand these, but these are lists that you can talk with your doctor about. The first is called the eye movement test for schizophrenia. As I said, I won't go into detail about those because it would take too much of your time, and I may not be qualified to go into detail about those. And then there's what's called the KYNA, which is it's a test of a certain type of acid that should show in your blood work that's related to your diagnosis. And additionally, there is it's called the SB 100. I have to get a little closer so I can read what I have on the screen. SB 100 protein. And of course, as far as imaging, and this again would be some of the most significant evidence you can have. There are MRIs that can be done, to brain MRIs, that studies have shown that schizophrenia is is also diagnosed by looking at your brain MRI. For example, there have been scientific studies that look at the brain scans of identical twins. And for the twin that has schizophrenia, there are differences in the what's called the ventricles. Again, this is something you need to discuss with your physician. Those folks who are dealing with this incredibly significant diagnosis, there's a larger ventricle that will show typically on the MRI. And so there are other scans that you can ask your doctor to order. And I realize it's difficult for many folks because they don't have the insurance coverage that they would like to have. Always look, if you have access to any kind of internet searching, look for community health organizations. Those are typically organizations that are in part financed by the federal government to provide medical care and medical treatment to folks that are not able to typically have access to the medical care that they would need. But just to list the others that Dr. Martin has talked about in his excellent materials: the cerebral cortex of the brain and the sagittal section of the brain, the coronal view of the brain, and as I mentioned, the ventricles of the brain. So these are objective tests that are going to be invaluable to you in your claim for Social Security benefits based on schizophrenia. The research indicates that about 25 to 30% of patients with schizophrenia have verbal auditory hallucinations that are resistant to treatment, and this results in substantial functional disability. So, and I know with the clients that I've had, many of them hear voices. Many of them hear voices, and those, in some cases, those voices are telling them to do things that are either harmful to themselves or harmful to other people. But you need to make sure that you're documenting that you do hear voices and exactly specifically what those voices are saying, so that that information appears in your medical records as well. Social Security disability decision makers are going to be looking for not only your diagnosis, but they're going to be looking for what treatment you've had, and they're going to be looking for your recent treatment, and you're going to be significantly handicapped if you don't have ongoing treatment, because and we understand that many folks are limited to, as I indicated earlier, because they don't have the resources to purchase the insurance that they really need in order to get those treatments. But and we will help you find treatment. We can't pay for that treatment because we don't have those kinds of resources. But as I mentioned earlier, there are community health organizations throughout the entire country that are funded primarily by the United States government, and there may be additional help available through those community health organizations. So we're at about 20 minutes in this particular discussion, and I know that most folks don't want to listen or view a video that exceeds much more than about 20 minutes. So I will stop, but just please know you're not dealing with these issues alone, that there are competent people who are willing and able to provide competent and valuable representation. Again, I can be reached at 800-900-4440, 800-900-4440. Work nationwide. Feel free to email me. We'll provide you with any information that we have. wjhermann, HERMANN, @gmail.com. 1 R 2 N's. wjhermann, HERMANN, @gmail.com. Thank you. Take good care.